Hi, so our project is about Ahmadi persecution in Pakistan, and over the course of the presentation, we'll explain who the Ahmadi Muslims are, what their persecution entails, and our reporting in Rabba. So just to start off, since we're a group of three, I figured we'd introduce ourselves. And my name is Isla, and I'm a third-year student at Northwestern in Qatar.
I'll just use my own microphone. So excuse the shakiness, we're over-caffeinated and excited to be here. My name is Isabella Palma, Northwestern University in Qatar. I'm originally from Honduras, moved to South Korea after that, then to Qatar, and now I'm here, so.
My name is Amna. I'm originally Qatari. I'm kind of a Qatari-Indian hybrid. I'm a graduate of Northwestern University in Qatar. And yeah, that's about it.
So there's about roughly 500,000 Ahmadis in Pakistan. They're a persecuted minority, and they're a minority sect of Islam. So there's about 350,000 to 500,000 estimated. And they're not only singled out in their passports, but also the Pakistani constitution. There's a Second Amendment saying that Ahmadis are non-Muslims, and they are subject to imprisonment for posing as Muslims. And that can technically be anything from like saying the Islamic greeting of Assalamu alaikum, or the kalima, which is the testimony of faith. And on top of their multifaceted experience of persecution, there's also in the thousands violence and attacks against them. So because of that, they qualify for asylum in countries like England, Canada, US. So many have fled, but the remainder that are left in Pakistan, usually as they face persecution in other towns, they go to a remote village called Rava, which is the only Ahmadi majority town in the country. So the reason that it's the only Ahmadi majority town in the country is because after the partition, the community had the land leased already to be their headquarters, since Muslims had to divide into the newfound Pakistan region. But the name Rava is mentioned in the Quran, and these people are not allowed to pose as Muslims according to the constitution. So without any of the consent of the residents, the name was changed to Janab Nagar, which just means town alongside the river. And there's also a first information report launched against all the citizens of Rava, because simply being Ahmadi means that they are in contravention of the law. And yeah. So basically, Ahmadi Muslims, what makes them different from other Muslims is the fact that they believe that their founder, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of the 19th century, is a prophet after Muhammad, and other Muslims believe that Muhammad is the final prophet. So for that reason, there's a doctrinal apostasy, and they're considered heretics or kafirs, deniers of the faith.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. So it's an extremely politicized issue in recent elections. So we got there, and unfortunately and fortunately, it was election time. So we arrived in the Lahore airport, and there were thousands, I mean not thousands, but tens of hundreds, well that's an exaggeration too, of cameras around the airport. So they were just expecting something to happen. It was an extremely heated political time in Pakistan. So Imran Khan, who's pictured, he was kind of, well, he was elected as a president and prime minister in Pakistan. And then he is attempting to kind of like bring up progress in Pakistan. So he appointed Atif Mia, a really prominent Ahmadi member. And after that, a lot of clerics came out, and they started saying like, oh, like how dare you appoint this member of the Ahmadi community? This goes against Pakistan. This goes against everything that we believe in. And so unfortunately for Atif Mian, he had to be removed, and just proves that, you know, that there's an extreme persecution in Pakistan. And the clerics are extremely powerful. And the issue is that in Pakistan, Ahmadis can't vote. So for a political agenda, it's not really convenient for them to kind of promote the Ahmadi kind of rhetoric and kind of Ahmadi belief, because they're going to get no votes out of it. So for them, it's just, you know, a lose-lose situation. If they promote an Ahmadi member in kind of like their political agenda, then it would be kind of detrimental to their whole election process. So I can skip that. So we got there and we were 2 weeks in Pakistan. We interviewed both victims and officials of the Ahmadi community. It was a very emotional time because we were going around Rava and it was extremely difficult to just sit with people and hear their testimonies. It was extremely, extremely emotional for us because we didn't know what to expect when we first got there. There were a lot of misconceptions, a lot of things that we didn't quite know how to approach because of the sensitivity of the topic in Pakistan. People kind of shared how, you know, family members got shot, how they got ostracized, how they were just simply outed from the society. So we kind of adapted to the cultural sensitivity in that sense, because it was really, really hard for these people to come out and talk about it. We could not disclose purpose of the trip due to the hostility against journalists and Ahmadis in Pakistan, so we couldn't even say anything when we were in Pakistan. We couldn't really mention what we were doing in Pakistan. So as a Honduran, I've never been in Pakistan before, and it was extremely, extremely kind of nerve-wracking to just get there and not know what to expect when we were at the airport. And then the securities were just checking around, looking at our equipment and seeing like, oh, what are you guys doing here? Like, they were asking a lot of questions that we didn't know how to answer. So it was a lot of, you know, nervousness that went around just arriving in the airport and seeing all the cameras, hearing about the explosions that had happened before in cities like Quetta. So there was a lot of expectation, a lot of nervousness around just being in Pakistan in of itself. And then coming to the people and seeing what had happened to them and kind of wanting to make the best out of the trip and want to properly represent the stories and the lives of these people who obviously don't have a voice. So just statistics that we wanted to include. 765 people kind of booked for the kalima, 477 for posing as Muslims, as Ayla was explaining, 379 assaulted, and 260 killed for just simply stating that they're Ahmadi Muslims.
Okay, so we're kind of running out of time, but as a lot of people here spoke about, when you're doing your research and your pre-reporting, you kind of don't know how it's going to be when you're actually in the field, and a lot of people mentioned that things were different. So we originally, our idea for this project was to report on Rava being a safe haven for Ahmadi Muslims and being a safe haven where they could relocate to, where they could live out their peaceful lives. But when they actually got there and we actually like spoke to them, it was quite the opposite. People were tired of their situation. They felt like they were sitting ducks. They didn't have a purpose. They weren't part of normal communities. Like my partner said, they were ostracized in normal communities. So when they relocated there, they didn't really have a purpose in their lives, and they didn't want to leave, but they didn't want to stay either. So they were kind of like in this state of like purgatory and like in-betweenness. And I think we kind of like messed up there. Yeah, basically they couldn't even, while they were in Rava, they thought that they would be able to practice freely, but even there they had to be very careful about how they practiced and how they even went to their like religious mosques and their religious sites. And we actually came out of this with a video which we sent out, but we're also gonna show it now, a little clip.
काफिर है या ये कादियानी है, इन्होंने तौहीन की है, ये मसला किया, वो मसला किया, और यहाँ कोई ऐसा इशू नहीं है, ऐसा जुर्म यही है कि ये कादियानी है और बस। तो हमारे ननकाना साहब ने तो दुकानों पे लिखा हुआ उन्होंने कि मरज़ियों का दाखिला ममनू है।
कहता बात ये कि तेरा पता चल गया उन्होंने तो अहमदी है, फिलहाल यहाँ से चला जा।
कि मरज़ियों का दाखिला मना है, कादियानियों का दाखिला मना है, और ये वाजिबुल कत्ल है, इनको चीज़ देने वाला, इनसे लेने वाला वो सब गुनाहगार हैं, इनको चीज़ देना हराम है।
So yeah, we just want to reiterate that even though Rava exists as a hub for Ahmadi Muslims, they're still not safe either there or in Pakistan. So these are just some testimonies from people that we talked to, and this image is actually of like a riot or a talk that was held against Ahmadi Muslims, and it actually, things like these take place very often, and sometimes like religious clerics will actually bring these kinds of gatherings into Rava itself. So even then, in their own communities, Ahmadis aren't really safe and they aren't validated even then. So we just want to thank the Pulitzer Center and everyone who helped make this project possible.
Hi, I'm Joy, and I'm with Spelman College. Amina, Ayla, and Isabella, when you were reporting, could you please talk about how, I assume like y'all like lived with people in the community. How do they live day to day? Where do they buy food? Like how, was it hard to come by accessing food and things like that?
Yeah, you can add it. Well, it's a remote village, but like, oddly enough, since there's nothing to do, I know other people have done journalistic stories about this in Rava. They're very into interior design and like architecture. So the house we stayed at was actually my extended family's, and it was super modern. And when Isabella came, she was like, "Wow, this is better than a hotel." So in terms of like accommodation, we were very comfortable. But that being said, like there's a lot of mental health effects of the residents just because they're just stuck in their house. Like as pretty as it is, they can't leave, and like even the women and children that we interviewed, they said one of the main things after moving to Rava was that they can't go out to prayer, they can't do, they can't meet in congregation with like other Muslims because after all the violent attacks, the community has a mandate that women and children just shouldn't add to numbers, or else like they're very likely to have an attack if these are all in one place. So I just think in general, like Rava is just kind of a place that people end up reluctantly, and in that sense it's isolated, but that's my perspective. I think Isabella, who had never been there before, can add it.
I think I was actually surprised because when I got there I thought, okay, like people are just gonna like, not, like Ayla said, like sit depressed, but then there's kind of like a hope that people have. They want to move forward, they want to do work. In our documentary, there's a couple who lost their 2 daughters, and they kind of like complain about just sitting down. Like they don't want to just be, you know, doing nothing. They want to move out. They want to, you know, be able to go to groceries, go do like normal activities, but it's just unsafe for them. So yeah, like you mentioned, there are mental health consequences. But yeah, I think you covered most of what we saw.
Yeah, and what you said about like just going out and being part of society, like to keep in mind like how ostracized these people are is that the women, they have this like very distinct hijab style that like Isabella noticed when she landed, and because of that, like when store owners recognize it, they refuse them service, so they have trouble buying things. And then when it comes to having a job, the minute your employer finds out you're Ahmadi, you're done for. And then I think just that adding up like really discourages people from like calling Pakistan a home or feeling at home, even if all their neighbors are Ahmadi.
And also, it was actually kind of, you know, I was really, really nervous getting there because there were a lot of explosions, there were a lot of attacks that were happening because of the elections. So just imagine like adding everything political that's going on to their already like very dire situation. So just adding that kind of like layering and that advantage that politicians take on people slandering on Ahmadis, like it's just, it adds to the situation, and there's like an addition of layers and layers and layers of issues that they have to deal with. So
I did want to end with one question building on the theme of trust, and that is what each one of you would recommend to the student fellows who are still going to go out into the field on how to build trust. And Jonathan, why don't you just say what your plan is in building trust? And just like a 30-second answer.
I think what I've seen in this project and in other projects as well that I've worked on is I think it really helps to spend time with the subjects or to be in contact with them before. beforehand, and one of our panelists this morning said the same thing of like, it helps to talk about things other than the actual thing you're reporting on, to actually build like a connection, to see if for the other person, like your subject or the community, to see that you're actually a human being too. You have interests that connect you to them as well, other than what you're covering in the place.
In my case, I asked Isla for a hijab, so everyone in the community was wearing a hijab, and I kind of not only wanted to be part of the community, but I wanted them to see me and see that I respected what they believed in. And I also think that I like sat down and listened a lot. I not only like spoke and try to impose like my like ideas of who they were, but I let them speak to me and tell me what they were going through, instead of like me coming down and telling them like, okay, this is what I have read about you guys, this is what I like come here to report. I just sat down and let them kind of like open up to me, and you know, that awareness of the sensitivity of the topic too, I feel like is important.
So I think one of my partners mentioned the couple that lost their 2 children. Basically, their house was burnt down for them being Ahmadi, and their like 3-year-old and 6-year-old daughters were suffocated and died. And we really like felt that was a compelling story to include in the narrative about Ahmadis. But the thing with that is calling them in for an interview, given that we don't know them personally, they knew that they were coming to say this story for that particular reason, but we wanted them to say transparently and narratively, opposed to just factually reiterating the sequence of events. So I think when it comes to our line of questioning, we didn't start off with like, hey, like, how did your daughters die? We asked things like, so what was your daughter's laugh like? And they kind of built upon that and really like told us what happened.